Good morning, everybody. Selamat pagi, teman-teman. Saya dari Indonesia juga. It's a real honour to be here today. This is the first opportunity we've had from the ICCB, the Indonesia-Australia Commercial Cattle Breeding Program, to formally speak with the Australian industry. And it's a real pleasure, and thanks to LiveCorp and ALEC for the opportunity to do that, to talk about what we've trying to achieve, what we're doing. So we heard from Pahimawan just now, and Louise. I'll have a bit of a different take on it, a bit of a fine tune on some of these things. We've only got one goal, and we want to see some further investment in cattle breeding in Indonesia. Secondly, the clear objectives for me and my team: we are trialling different cattle breeding systems. We're documenting the solutions. And then we need to promote the successful models to industry and government. So how does it work? We commenced in February 2016, so we've been at it for coming up 2 years. Selection of partners would seemingly be a reasonably simple task. It is not. We had something like 80 different proposals, and from that we've selected 8 projects. Clearly, we wanted to select project partners who would be potentially sustainable and commercially viable. That doesn't mean to say they are going to be commercially viable, but we're certainly, that was the objective of the selection process. The phase we're in at the moment is the implementation process, so we're literally out there breeding cattle, breeding calves, weaning, etc. We expect to be able to promote what we're doing actively beginning sometime next year. And clearly we'll be promoting those models and systems that are working well. So we've got 3 broad systems. Louise mentioned it briefly just now. One of the core systems we're looking at trialling is what we call the SISCA model. This is SISCA is an acronym. Indonesians love their acronyms, but we love it too. SISCA stands for System Integrasi Sapi Kelapa Sawit, which means cattle integrated with palm oil plantations. We've got 4 projects situated, 2 in Kalimantan, 1 in Bengkulu, and 2 in Lampung. Bengkulu and Lampung are 2 provinces in Sumatra. The second system is a semi-intensive grazing. Now, there's quite a lot of Indonesia has great potential for grazing of cattle, and they are the dryland areas. So areas east of Java and east of Sumatra, and Kalimantan. So we're really talking about East Indonesia and Sulawesi, prime areas where grazing of cattle can be reasonably effective. I was down in Timor sometime last year looking at projects, and the Timorese farmers were whinging to me about how hard their country is. For those of you that don't know me, I come from an area in between Townsville and Charters Towers, in amongst the China apple. And it doesn't rain a lot there in the last few decades, and it's pretty bloody hard there. And I reminded the Timorese farmers that the mum and dad shows in Australia run big herds of cattle on very marginal country quite well, and so they should stop their complaining and get on and fix their systems. I held, and I'll stand by that, I think there's great potential for grazing of cattle in East Indonesia. And as Pahimawan alluded to earlier, it's about logistics and fixing those logistics and creating investment. So that's what we intend to do. We've got 2 projects, one in Sumbawa. It's 700 hectares on pretty marginal country, but we believe we can develop something there. The third system is a cut and carry smallholder system, and they're largely with smallholders. Geographically, the green ones there are the SISCA models. Orange ones are the small holders, and the two blue ones are the semi-intensive grazing models. So what's the herd? What have we actually done up to date? Just a really quick snapshot there. You see we've got 7 projects with cattle. The 8th project is about to start with cattle next month. We kicked off with about, I think we've distributed 1,270 heifers and 70 bulls. So we've got some calves on the ground and we're weaning cattle as we speak. The herd's growing quite nicely. Looking at a few conception rates. This is a rather interesting graph. In short, the orange ones, the orange boxes are the boxes where cattle have conceived in our project time frame, meaning to say that we've created, the cattle have conceived since we've delivered. The first 2 projects there, they were the earliest projects, but they have been the better run projects as well. The blue one there were the, the blue one there, Project E, and I've left them anonymous for a fairly good reason at this stage. They were delivered 100% pregnant heifers for a trial purpose to small farmers. But what that graph table shows us there is that some projects are going quite well and others are struggling. This was obviously inevitable. So what I'm going to do is gallop through a couple of little case studies, a few project profiles, one a Siska model and another one a small farmer model. So this project is a typical of the 4 of what we're doing. So they start off with 1,000 hectares available for grazing under palm oil. Cattle yards are already in place. We delivered 250 heifers and a few bulls. About a year ago, they're coming up for their project. The bottom line, the bottom bullet point there, I've got our target weaning rate. So obviously when we started, we created a bit of a financial model in order to predict their sustainability. The KPI that we kicked off with there was 70% weaning rates for the first 2 years, building up to 80% over 4 years. I imagine quite a lot of us here would be happy if we could sustain 80% weaning rates. We believe with good management in that high rainfall country with the right inputs, we can achieve those sort of weaning rates. And there's certainly something to set our targets for. There's a nice little picture of those heifers on one plantation. I'd like to say that they still look like that. But we all know what happens when you kick these projects off. They tend to go south. A couple of shots of cattle there getting watered and receiving supplement on a daily basis. You see the electric fence in there. These cattle move daily on a rotational basis. The blocks on a palm oil plantation probably average between 20 and 40 hectares, and they are moved from one day to the next across those blocks using electric fences. And clearly that takes a little team of fellas out there moving those cattle on foot. You'd be surprised how quiet these cattle get. Literally within weeks of getting off a boat, these guys are walking in amongst them in the palm oil. So it's really quite manageable, but nevertheless, you can just take a quick glance at the photo on the left, how dark it is under those palm trees, and that's where our challenges begin. That electric fence is set along the roadside. Obviously, where there's a lot of light, there's a lot of grass. Where there's no light, there's no grass. And these sorts of challenges are the work ahead of us. So 4 months later, after that photo was taken of those lovely heifers on that nice grass, half of our plantations turned into these sort of weeds. Clearly the cattle aren't going to do very well in this sort of an environment. So when I say the plantation was being neglected, that's a bit hard. However, the CPO price also dropped down a great deal. And what happens when companies start to lose their cash flow is they start to cut costs. That includes herbicide, weed control, etc. What that means for our cattle is that the weeds pull back and we run out of pasture. And on top of that, we kicked off with not supplementing these cattle. Why didn't we supplement the cattle? Well, we thought our initial evaluation was we'd get the cattle through and keep our costs down. Remember, the core of this program is to develop commercially sustainable models. The outcomes were pretty dramatic, and my team and the partner, you've got to remember that we're in a partnership with these companies. These are big palm oil producing companies. These are worth millions of dollars. Their focus is producing palm oil and galvanising their efforts into these little cattle projects is no mean feat. So what happened was a bit of a council of war, so to speak. And one of the great models, and I think Ibu Louise neglected it, the great strength of the Indonesia-Australia cattle breeding program is the fact that we've granted these cattle to the project. They remain our property. So if these projects fail, I can literally go in there and pull those cattle out. This is clearly an animal welfare objective for us. However, it also gives us great teeth and the ability to control what happens in that program. So when I asked the general manager of the plantation and literally the owner of the plantation for lunch, they want to come and sit down and talk. And we say, listen, this is going south and we have to turn it around. So we did. But that's what the sort of thing we were looking at. This is the first calf heifer, and all of us know that she's going to take a long time to recover and indeed get back into calf again. And with that sort of a process, that project is going to fail. And I would be safe in saying that a great majority of cattle delivered into these sort of projects will face this sort of condition if things aren't approached in a more professional manner. So in a strange way, we've almost had to let some of these projects start to fail to galvanise the action of the management and the ownership of the plantations. It's a steady process of learning that we have to go through. However, what have we done so far to fix this? We went straight in, provided some good solid mineral supplements with a little bit of energy and a bit of protein, a couple of kgs per day at a cost of about 40 cents a day per head. There was a small percentage of pregnant cattle there, or in late pregnancy. They were losing their calves, they were aborting, they were abandoning their calves. So we improved what facilities they had. We brought the cows in around the cattle facility so we could take great care of them. We commenced a pasture development program. This included an agreement from the plantation to undertake a widespread weed control program and the pasture development program that would go over a long period of time. And all due credit to the plantation, they did exactly what they agreed with me to do, and I'm happy to say that we've pretty much turned it around. So from the first 4 months, we had a conception rate of just 62%. Now, probably a few of us might think, well, that's not too bad. I had 70%, 75% my KPIs. 62% was not what I was looking for. Moreover, I was more worried about the condition of the cattle and their ability to get back into calf. But anyway, following 2 months or 3 months of supplementation, we've preg tested again the other day, and these cattle are now up to 80% pregnant. And clearly that's to do with the supplementation. Calf mortalities, we've pulled that right back now. I think we've lost just a few head in the last couple of months. So we've got a calving area and we've got creep areas in the cattle yards. You know, we're grazing these cattle over 1,000 hectares, where they're on a 90-day rotation, so every time they come back around the cattle yards, we can run them through and pull off those that are due to calve. And we calve them down in an area where we can ensure that the calves are going to survive. And we're looking after our weaners a whole lot better. from day one in this program, I've approached every single project as with a core objective, and that is to develop the feed base, cost-effective feed base. Every cattleman, every cattle person in the world has to have a cost-effective feed base. And Indonesian cattlemen are no different. So we went about developing some pasture. And in the palm oil plantations where the trees aren't too old or too thick, there's a great potential to develop some good quality pasture. You can see there's the photo on the left, the grass growing very well. We've got a nice little area of Lakina growing there. You can see the smile on the face of that chap. He's been involved with cattle for 15 years in Indonesia, and he's smiling for a damn good reason, not because just he's in front of the camera. He knows that that's the future of his industry. That Lakina is planted in open areas, and that will be grazed by the weaners over a period of time. Obviously, the palm plantation is not too keen on growing Lakina. They're about growing palm oil. So we have to develop strategies in available areas, if you like, within the plantations. There's a great photo of some legumes we've got growing as well. We have great achievements doing this, and we're going to keep doing it, but there are challenges. One is we don't yet actually know which grasses and species will survive under trampling and under shade. So we've got a good team of pasture experts helping with this work. The lack of seed is a very big issue. There's no commercial seed providers in Indonesia that we can work with. So possibly one of the spin-offs from this program will be this sort of involvement and growth of an industry. It takes time, requires a great commitment. So what have we learned in the SISCA projects? We have to integrate our activities. We've got to provide mineral supplementation at all times. In the early years until pasture is developed, supplementation is essential. Developing quality pasture is essential to sustainability. The plantation itself, there is increased yields in CPO as well. The second little profile I've got is a smallholder group in East Java. A couple of nice photos there. Cut and carry literally means cut and carry. One of those chaps there, he's one of the partners in the project. You can see there a little rice paddy there that's harvested in the foreground of the photo, and some corn and some king grass there as well. So a little profile of those projects was we delivered 100 heifers and 3 bulls to them back in January this year. It was a government-funded cattle yards. They're pretty committed, these farmers, and politically it was a good project for us to be involved with as well. A few months after we went in there, things went south as well. And it took some turning around. You can see that cow and calf there. Clearly she's in a pretty bad way, in a pretty ordinary little cattle yard. Got a wet floor, it's dirty. There's a fair chance that calf's going to struggle as well. The photo on the right there, you can see the floor of the cattle yard. This was a government-built cattle yard. The flooring all broke up. You know, this is a 3-metre rainfall we're dealing with here, so concrete's essential. And you know, those cattle are going to do it pretty tough. This was the body condition score of those cattle recorded since February. So we got to June and they're really struggling. So we had to go in there and turn things around. One of the core issues with small farmers is finance and cash flow. So we've had to find a few solutions to these issues. What did we do about it? We had to literally enable a concentrate supply to those cattle ourselves. So I had a small little bucket of funds there. We're able to rescue those cattle and turn them around. We also funded the repair of those cattle yards at a small cost. We facilitated a short-term finance deal. We've enabled the farmers to become a formal co-op, which is has some impact because it will enable those farmers to access greater levels of finance and assistance from the Indonesian government. We also got rid of some empty and undesirable heifers. which helped their cash flow as well. But it was a short-term solution. We've still got some long-term finance issues to deal with this group. We got stuck in, and you can see there the photo on the left, those calves are having a good time there, and they're growing well. So we pulled mortalities back to less than 5%, which was my target. And the little weaners on the right there, they're pretty happy and healthy in that little yard there as well. That yard was built for next to nothing by the local farmers themselves. I was asked to give a bit of an insight as to the 5-to-1 policy and the 10-to-1 policy, particularly with smallholders. I'm not going to address that subject, and I dare say the forum themselves, the panel themselves, will be happy to talk about that later on. But with smallholders in general, the key things that we need to understand with them is we need to understand the group's financial capabilities. We need to understand how many cattle can they manage, the feed sources, what networks they have around them, and the cattle markets available to them. So overall, what does this mean for the industry, this program, as we're going today? Indonesian importers need a way forward to engage in cattle breeding. The Indonesian government's been pretty tough on them at the moment. They're forcing them, coercing them would be a good word, I guess, to be engaged in cattle breeding. The ICCB is piloting 3 different breeding systems. We're documenting those challenges and the solutions. There's some good signs, I think, that the breeding projects can be profitable, but it's still early days. We will have learning modules available on our website that will be go live within a couple of weeks, hopefully. So I'll be around for the next couple of days, and we've got some brochures over there at the Live Corp stand. And by all means, come and ask me anything you'd like. Thank you very much.